Oh man, another Ranchero video. So today we want to get the sound deadening all over the floor. We want to get the wiring done from front to back. I'm talking switch panels, I'm talking gauges, headlights, taillights, everything to do with wiring we want to get knocked out. And also I want to get the fuel cell mounted. Just anything that we can do to get this car closer to running is what we want to tackle.
And now you're watching, bro, we don't got time for this today, dude. We gotta get going. Welcome to BodeVision.
Hey, so what is up and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me on another video. I really appreciate it, but we're gonna get right into it and get started. The first thing I'm gonna do is lay down the sound deadening material. This isn't the high price stuff like the Dynamat. This is a little cheaper, but that's just fine for this build. So I'm gonna get it laid out nice and even. I'm gonna start on the driver's side and work my way over to the passenger side, and that should work out just fine. So that sound deadening is not only going to deaden sound, it's also going to prevent any water from coming through any small holes that there were. I also did seam sealer before I did the sound deadening, so between the two of those things, we should be just fine. Now that we want to start running the wires, I have two different size looms. This is just a braided plastic loom. That's 3/4, and this is 1/4. So for the bigger looms that have maybe anything more than 2 wires, we're going to want to run it through the 3/4. If it's just 1 or 2 wires, we might break off from the bigger loom and run those wires in the smaller loom. Then it's all going to look nice and clean. Another thing that I really like to do, well, another thing that I really dislike to do is use electrical tape. This entire car, you're not going to see any electrical tape on it at all because it just turns into a mess. I hate pulling it apart, so if you don't put any there at all, you're never going to have to deal with it. And just like that, we got the wiring pretty much knocked out. I'll get into that a little bit more later, kind of show you some of the diagrams and the circuits or schematics, just the way that some of it works. It's kind of a lot more to do when you think about it than what you think of initially. So what we want to do next is I want to get this fuel cell mounted. This is a 15-gallon or 18-gallon fuel cell. I don't remember exactly, but I wanted to make sure that I got one with the fuel level sending unit because I had one that was just 10 gallons, which first of all is too small for this car, I believe. And then second of all, it was a racing cell and it was baffled and it didn't have any kind of sending unit. And I feel like I need to know how much gas I have when I'm driving this thing, especially because I plan on taking it on pretty long trips. Well, not too long, but you get the idea, you know what I'm saying. So for this, it's pretty self-explanatory. It came with these brackets and there's just some brackets that go across. So I'm gonna get that welded in the bed, and then the wood floor is gonna go right over that. And then we're gonna drill a nice circle. And this is nice and easy, just like that. So that'll work out perfect. Let's get these brackets welded in. And see, I don't have to worry about thieves or anything, but I do gotta worry about these guys over here. Hey, man! Gotta watch out for them cows, I'm telling you. So now that should be pretty solid. That's not going to go anywhere. We don't got to worry about it at all, especially when I added these braces right here to go there, and they're still a little rusty, but everything's a little rusty. This is an old car, so it'll be fine. We're just going to sand them down, get all the rust off it, and then I'll prime it. This is all kind of just mock-up to get to the point where I could drive the car around, and then I'll probably pull the whole thing apart, well, to a certain extent, and then clean up everything. Since this car's been sitting for so long, I just want to get it on the road, and that's where we're heading. Oh, and another thing, with these bolts up top, this bolt there, that bolt there, I just welded them so that way when the bed is completely on, when all the wood slats are there, all you got to do is stick a socket straight up in the air, and then you'll be able to drop it like that stud is stuck there, because now it is stuck there. So now that all the wiring is pretty much all the way done, I mean, there's really nothing left to do besides plugging the headlights and taillights in. I think the fuel pump still has to be plugged in, but either way, every single thing is there ready to go. So now I kind of wanted to show you this as an example to get a little bit more in depth with what's going on. So obviously you have your 12 volts coming to the battery, and that goes to the fuse box. And this fuse box and these gauges, now the whole reason why this process was so easy is because I used the easy wiring fuse box and wires, and every single wire is labeled so you know exactly where it needs to go, and the gauges work with that. They come with the sending units for the fuel pump and for the oil pressure and for the temp sensor. Everything is one kit. It's all inclusive, so that really made this process a lot easier. So like I was saying, power to the fuse box. Here we have the headlight fuse, and then if you go down, here's the light switch. This is going to be off. So it comes down to the headlight switch. When it's off, obviously nowhere for anywhere to go, it's off. If you flip it up to on, when the headlights come on, this has got to go down. Then the gauge cluster lights have to come on. That's the, you know, the display lights, everything that lights up your gauges so that way you can read them at night. That's got to come on every single time. Then if you go down this path, this goes to the switch that either has up for brights or down for not brights, just a regular old light. And this switch is an on-on. We have all different kinds of switches. For example, this switch is just on-off. This one is on-on. So in other words, no matter where it is, it's going to be directing power no matter how you have it. So at most times, it's going to stay in the down position. So that's just going to be the low beams. And then there's always going to be running lights because the running lights are tied into this as well. And then if you flip it up, it not only goes to the high beams, it takes power away from the low beams. So the low beams turn off, high beams turn on, and it goes to the blue high beam indicator in your dash. I'll show you inside so that way we can see it a little clearer. Alright, so here we go, and we got to keep in mind that the car is going to do different things depending on the position of the ignition. We had to hardwire this in as well. So right now, the key can just come out. It's on nothing. So the horn's going to work. The signals are not going to work, but the lights will work. And there's all kinds of countless examples, and that all comes wired in, programmed into the easy wiring fuse box. So over here we got the switch panel that I made in the last Ranchero video. These are all going to be labeled and stuff so that way if anybody else is driving the car. So this switch right here, up, and then I'll go back down, and then up, you can see the lights lighting up. So now the headlights are going to be on, tail lights on, running lights, and low beam. So this is that second switch. This is the low beam, high beam switch. So right now it's just staying in the low beam position. So every time I'm turning on my lights, on or off, the gauges light up just like they should. And then if I want to put on my brights, boom, and then there's the blue indicator light that I was talking about. So brights on, brights off, brights on, brights off, and then headlights off. So now we're going to take our key from off and we're going to put it to the running position. All the gauges power up. I'll do the lights so that way you can see what's going on. I still got the brights right here, and then here's the signal. Now this isn't going to flash because it's not going through the flasher relay quite yet because there's nothing there, but you'll still get the idea. Left signal, we got the green light. Right signal, we got this green light over here. So left, right. And this switch, this is a perfect example of what I was talking about. So this on, off. This is on at left, off in the center, on at the right. So that's just a perfect example how there's many different switches, many different styles. Depending on what you're using it for, is you got to buy the switch to correspond with what you want it to do. So we had to consider all of that the whole way. And then the ignition, I'm not going to hit the ignition right now because the starter will take off like crazy. Well, hold on, let me take off the key and then I'll hit it for you. So this one is going to be for the ignition. This is just over by itself, and see we got the little ignition label on here. So this for the headlights, on and then off, but for the ignition, that's going to be on down, and then as soon as you let go, it's gonna start. Now this is the starter. The ignition is over at the key, and this is just to activate the starter. And then as soon as you let it go, the starter is gonna turn off, but everything else is gonna remain on. So that's another example of a different type of switch. So that's just one example of the many circuits that we had to add in this car from wiring it from front to back. Another one that's way more complex is the tail lights, because you have your signal lights and then you also have your brake lights and then your brake switch. On these old cars, whenever you hit your brake, that lights up, and then also that's the same light. That second filament in that bulb is the same thing that lights up when you're using your turn signals. So if you notice any of these old cars, or I think some of the modern cars have it too, where if they have their brakes on, then that brake light is going to turn off if they have their blinker on, and then it's going to pulse back and forth. In other words, the brake light and the blinker light or signal light is the same exact filament. So that's another whole complex circuit that we had to figure out, and we got it all figured out, but I'm not going to get into that one because I gave you the perfect example of the headlights, and I can go on for hours and hours about all the wiring we did because it truly did take hours and hours. So now that's going to be it for today, but not for this video. I'm going to bring this in tomorrow because I really want to make sure I show you guys the car firing up and having it idle, and I'm excited to see that too. So tomorrow morning we should be ready to come in, just hook up a couple things, got to hook up the fuel pump, and this thing should fire up. Now it's the next day, but I kind of wanted to clarify something. I know I was talking about how easy the easy wiring is, but then I was showing you guys all these complex circuits and all stuff like that. You got to understand the easy wiring kit is made to integrate in with a steering column, like the stick for the hazards, turn signals, brights, that's all in there, and those circuits are within the steering column itself. We're not using any of that by using these switches, so that's why we had to figure out all these circuits. If you wanted to put the easy wiring kit in your car, you would just have to go through the directions, whether you're doing it for a Ford or Chevy. They have all kind of write-ups to figure out what you need for your different application. So now that everything's all hooked up, we want to do the first official proper startup. We've started up one time before, but that's when we had the fuel tank on the outside of the car. We just had 12 volts going straight from the battery to the distributor, and then 12 volts going to the starter. Now we want to make sure all our wiring is done correctly. Everything's ran how it should be, so I guess we'll see what happens. I got to go to the switch panel and I'll show you guys the whole sequence here. So I got the switch panel here. Obviously it's not bolted up, but that will be bolted up. So we got the key and the keys on. So I got my 12 volts there. I can read I'm good to go. Lights work, everything works. Then I got my fuel pump, so we'll listen for that. This one's the fuel pump. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear that, but the fuel pump did come on, and that's got to stay on. And then this one's for fans. And you can hear that, but I don't need to leave the fans on while I'm starting it up because it's not going to go anywhere or anything. And so this one, this is the ignition. This is going to hit the starter, so as soon as I hit this, it'll fire right up. Hopefully, we'll see. Oh, let me give it a little gas. Now, I mean, as you can see, it's running. We still gotta tune it. We still gotta do the timing. I don't know if you can hear me at all, but I mean, man, the feeling to see this car running, I thought it would never come. I didn't think this day was ever gonna happen. It's so awesome to just see the car running. I'm not gonna run it for more than 30 seconds because there's no fluid in it or anything. Can you even hear me? Hold on, let me shut it off. Man, so I don't know how well you heard me, but it is just awesome to see this car running. I never thought I would see the day that this car is gonna fire it up. Get in it, hit the switch, fire it up. I was honestly thinking at one point to just give up on the whole thing, but I mean, man, it is awesome that we didn't and that it is finally going. And also, there's a bunch of smoke that was coming off the headers. That was just like residual stuff that was burning off from it sitting for so long. But once it gets tuned and once we get all the timing straight, everything's gonna be good to go. Hopefully I can just get in the car, fire it up, and take it down the road. I think we're not too far from there now. All the wiring's here for the headlights, all the wiring's in the back for the tail lights. There's not much else to do besides kind of tie everything up. Really all the wiring itself is what took so long, but I mean, man, we are there. So I still need to get a drive shaft for the Ranchero before I can officially take it down the road. But I mean, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It is just awesome. I mean, I keep saying it, I cannot stand how freaking cool it is to just fire that thing up and let it idle on its own with a 302 that I completely rebuilt from the ground up. Well, I feel like I completely rebuilt it from the ground up. I know technically I didn't, but to have all the pistons out, to do all the rings, to do all the bearings, to do everything, make sure it's within spec, do everything back to how it should be, up to spec, you know, torque specs, everything, and then to have that motor fire up. Dude, look at that deer. I don't know if you can see it. Bambi over there, you know what I'm saying? Anyways, so I think that's gonna be it for this one. In the next one, maybe I'll ride it down the street, maybe not. I don't know if I'm there yet, but that'll be coming soon. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like this video, leave in the comment section what you think about the old Ranchero girl firing up for the first time. So thank you so much for watching. Like this video, comment, subscribe. You know what it is, YouTube. I'm out.